Good evening, Sanvanani Dumelang, and welcome to episode 118 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Khumalo. It's the Wednesday edition of the Private Property Podcast, and as usual, we are, of course, speaking to somebody from Absa Home Loans. I'm sure you're probably wondering what we're talking about, but before we even get to what we're talking about this evening, I think one of the things that we've certainly been talking about here on the Private Property Podcast, and even across our various social media platforms, whether you follow us on Twitter, you've liked our page on Facebook, or certainly are subscribed to our YouTube channel, is of course the virtual property show. And that's something that we're quite excited to bring to your screens. And that is of course the first ever virtual property show. You know that we're going to have it, across Joburg, Cape Town and Durban, but COVID hit our shores and we had to find different ways to still bring you quality content with the right experts to help us navigate our property journey, regardless of whether you're a tenant, you're an investor, or perhaps looking to buy your first home. It certainly doesn't matter where you are in your property journey. The virtual property show is one that you do not want to miss. And if you still haven't signed up for it, do go to privateproperty.co.za. Make sure that you sign up and join us this Friday and Saturday. It's going to be quite an incredible program. I'm pretty excited. I know the team that's put it together is also quite excited. I'll also be there during, both Fridays and on the Friday and the Saturday. So I do look forward to, seeing some familiar faces. And if you're going to be joining us, if you've already signed up, do let us know down here in the comment below, in the comment section below. I want to hear from you. What are some of the talks that you're, interested in, viewing, and some of the guests that you're looking forward to participating and really interacting with during our program? So that's only something that you can look forward to this Friday and Saturday. We're always bringing you quality content here at Private Property. And another thing that you can certainly look forward to when it comes to quality content is, of course, the First Time Home Buyers Show, which is now on Wednesday evening. So just after this podcast, we're going to be having Esther Clausen, who's going to be joining you and, of course, taking over the reins. And that's a topic you do not want to miss. She's going to be speaking to Unomcebo Masuku, who is a property investor, and they'll be looking at how she went from buying one property, so her first home, to having 40 student accommodation units, which is of course quite a huge feat. I'm sure a lot of you probably want to know, how did she scale her property portfolio? What are some of the strategies she used? And what are some of the tips that she picked up from buying that first unit that she then used in buying more and more units? So do make sure that you stay tuned. So just after the Private Property Podcast, do stay tuned to Esther Clausen, who will be taking you through the First Time Home Buyers Show. But before we get there, we are, of course, talking about property this evening. And one of the things, as I said, it's Wednesday, so we always have somebody from Absa Home Loans. And this evening, we're looking at payment relief and what it means for you as the customer. I think one of the really big things is when lockdown was sort of at our door, various financial institutions found different ways to offer some kind of relief to customers. And oftentimes, with a lot of those service providers, the period was for 3 months. We're now 6 months after the fact. And of course, a lot of people still found themselves in very difficult financial times. So we're going to be having a conversation with Absa Home Loans to see what kind of interventions, they've put in place to make sure that their customers are still looked after and are able to weather this economic storm. Because I think one of the very unfortunate things is, even though the restrictions have eased up over the past few months, unfortunately, the economic effects of the COVID-19 crisis is still being felt by so many of us at home. And to help us better understand, I think this is the man who would understand what risk is and how to mitigate that kind of risk and really weigh out various options, even when it comes to things like COVID-19, which of course we couldn't have anticipated. I'm joined this evening by somebody who we've had right here on the Private Property Podcast, and that is Ewald Kellerman, who is the Chief Risk Officer at Absa Home Loans. Good evening, Ewald. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Zama. Thank you so much for having me again.
It's only a pleasure. So Ewald, I think one of the big things is we've heard quite a number of financial institutions, sometimes even various, types of companies talk about payment holidays. I think that was the very big buzzword at the beginning of lockdown, and various people sort of dissecting it. And of course, with Absa, they've used, the term that says payment relief. Perhaps take us through Absa's approach when it comes to this one, because, a lot of people have, thought maybe it is actually a holiday. What does it mean if it's actually relief, and how do they best kind of look at how that essentially affects them?
No, thank you, Zama. I think if I can remind you of where we were before lockdown, in the last 6 months we've gotten used to, I guess, the conditions and the new normal. So it's not really a new normal anymore. But when we started COVID and we started the lockdown, we really put our heads together to say, what do our customers need, and how can we assist customers through this difficult time? We got together as a banking industry at the time through the Banking Association, and we spoke about how we can offer some solutions. Because in a lockdown situation, I work for the bank. I'm very fortunate that I earn a salary. But many of our customers need to go out and earn their money by doing activities and running their businesses. And we started quite early on, and we said, what type of relief can we give them? And not to design a product or not to get any fame or fortune ourselves, but rather to see, how can we participate in helping the country up and running, get up and running. We couldn't afford much in terms of discounts. So I think, that was, the bank is quite restricted in terms of what we can offer. We've got depositors that has their money with us, and we can't take their interest and give it away. So we took the same approach as many of the other banks, but we were very, very explicit about how a customer should use it. Now, payment holiday, I think, is a wrong term to use, because that implies that there's some level of discount or some level of softening circumstances. And that is not really the case, because interest still gets charged to the loan. So payment relief, we'd settled on that name, and we explained it to say that if you can still repay your credit account, you should try to do so, because it is in your best interest if you can still afford that repayments. If you can't, because of various number of reasons, either you've lost your income, or you've got unexpected expenses, or you're even just concerned that you might lose your job and you need some money to hold on to, we've offered that solution very, very broadly. But we were very specific to say, if interest gets charged, it's still in your best interest to pay the loan. If you cannot pay the loan, that's better for you. But don't expect to get some sort of discount if you can't pay and you ask for payment relief. And I know that's a very small nuance, but I think when we get to sort of how it expires and what type of position we leave our customers in, it starts making quite a big difference to the financial well-being of our customers.
And I think, it's actually such an important distinction to be able to make, Ewald, because as you say, as much as once you sit down and kind of explain it to people, you could have easily stayed with the term sort of payment holiday, but words matter, and words have a power about them. And in the event where your financial institution is saying you've got a payment holiday, you might probably think that interest probably isn't being capitalized, or you now have that free 3-month window period where there isn't a ripple effect to your non-payment. So I think even being able to understand what it means in the event where you do opt for the payment relief, because of your financial situation, which I know we're all very understanding of because of where we're finding ourselves, not just in South Africa, but really globally. So it is quite an important distinction, I think, as customers, for us to be able to also understand when we have conversations with our financial institutions, especially when it comes to finances and the consequences of paying or non-payment, and being able to be proactive in even having that conversation. Because I think oftentimes customers, Ewald, are whether disempowered or they don't know that if they're now struggling to make payments, you simply need to, be proactive and having a conversation instead of waiting for your debit orders to bounce and your credit score being negatively affected. And of course, that just has a huge ripple effect on other things the moment it happens. So it's just so crucial to be able to have the conversation with the financial institution. I think in the event where you're a customer with Absa, I know, especially with the home loans department, they've been very proactive, sending, SMSs, asking if you wanted to opt in or opt out of, that payment relief. And so they kind of tried to ease the process as much as possible, so you didn't have to, for example, go into a branch and have to apply, to get the payment relief. So it really has been a way to ease the burden that consumers are faced with right now, and to make that part of, the stress and the financial anxiety that we find ourselves as bearable as possible. But Ewald, I think one of the big things that are quite unfortunate that we've heard in the news. In South Africa, we saw Stats SA releasing the unemployment figures for Q2, and they're really shocking. I mean, when you go through it and you realize the level of unemployment in South Africa, whether you use the expanded definition or perhaps a slightly more narrow definition, we know that, for example, 2.2 million jobs have been shed in Q2, which is of course very shocking because those are so many families. Perhaps take us through, and I think one of the big things with that is you then begin to understand how many people are essentially in financial distress, because those numbers should keep all of us awake at night, I think, if anything, because it means that so many families are essentially affected. Perhaps take us through what the potential next steps for people who find themselves in that situation would be, especially for Absa's perspective, because it may be that, for example, somebody at home, let's say they did decide to take a payment relief, and obviously initially it was for that 3-month period, and now they're finding that they've essentially subsequently lost their job, whereas perhaps before they're just trying to be a bit prudent and see how they can patch here and make sure that they're as financially stable as possible. And now they find themselves being one of the 2.2 million South Africans who effectively, are affected. Perhaps take us through, what Absa's approach is when it comes to dealing with people who now find themselves in that situation.
Thank you. I think that's a quite a broad question, and I'm going to take the opportunity to give a broad answer. I think if I can start just to take us one step back. When we started payment relief, we did two things. We firstly called it payment relief, but also tried to make sure that our intention behind that works the way that we planned it. So what I mean by the intention behind it is we try to make it as simple as possible, because customers were finding themselves in a certain level of distress and needed to get to an answer quickly. We tried to make it as comprehensive as possible. So not just customers who could prove that they lost their jobs, but also customers who couldn't run their businesses, customers who had unexpected expenses. If your spouse lost their job, how do you prove that to the bank? So asking for proof of loss of income, like many of the banks did, I think they missed quite a lot. So we try to be as simple as possible, as comprehensive as possible, and as inclusive as possible. And that resulted in us doing the most amount of payment relief accounts of all the banks in South Africa. We had 735,000 customers that applied for payment relief. So that I think shows you some of the level of financial distress that we've seen. So we know that there was a very big need, and we knew we had to respond. But we couldn't respond in the traditional way. A lot of the things that we've learned in the last couple of months completely changed the way that we look at banking and we look at credit. If you take the unemployment numbers that you mentioned, the unemployment figure last month was just over 30%. The new number is 23.5%. And it's because of a technical reason, because in lockdown, many consumers couldn't look for jobs. So it only takes the ones actively seeking for jobs. But we know that the situation has worsened. So how does a number then drop? Our sort of economic models also said that if you've got low interest rates and low inflation, then it must be a great time for South Africa. We've got that's a great solution. But that's not what happened, because with low interest rates and low inflation, we see a lot of distress coming through. So a lot of the normal things that we viewed and the normal ways that we considered banking broke. We also, I think in the past, was very specific around if a customer can't afford a loan, usually it's because that customer got himself into financial trouble in some sort of way. And we would say that customer is high risk. But in this case, we found customers who were great customers and who ran brilliant businesses, finding themselves in the wrong industry, being a hotel industry or a tourism industry. And they might have been very successful in their place of business. And you can't anticipate this, but when COVID hit, the entire sector closed down, and it's not necessarily because of their fault. So we also looked at risk, and the customers who needed payment relief wasn't the high risk customers. It was customers who had successful businesses, had a lot of success before, and who were actually very good at managing their financial affairs in general. So risk wasn't a determinant in us helping to decide whether a customer qualifies for payment relief or not. And I think that's a big thing in our minds that broke, because that conditions didn't hold. We then sort of changed the way that we collect. And usually the way that we collect is we start phoning and we ask, please, can we, you've missed your payment. Can we make some sort of arrangement? And it's quite deliberate, and we let you know of your obligations under the loan agreement. But we've managed to make that a lot softer, because we realized that a lot of these situations that customers find themselves in is not due to their own making. It is something outside of our control. And I think in doing that, we've created better relationships with our customers. Now, I mean, you mentioned 2.2 million jobs that's been lost. So there is a lot of remaining financial distress in the market, and I think the only way for us to properly deal with that, and if you sort of build on that, the lessons that we've learned, that a lot of these customers are good customers, then what you want to do is you really, as a bank, want to see how you can help and how you can create a better situation for them. If we can create a better situation for our customers, those customers will recover. They will stand up again and start up businesses that are successful. And we will, again, have a great relationship. If we're there in their time of need, which we can be because of the way that the bank is structured, there's a very, very bright future for all of us together. Now the new version of payment relief was structured along those lines. And we kept the comprehensive and inclusive parts. So we want to be as open as possible to having these discussions. But instead of a simple approach, the simple approach wouldn't really solve for the current situation we find ourselves in. We've gotten very specific about finding solutions that's tailored to the right customer at the right time. If you've lost your income to your estate agent and you haven't earned commission for a while and the deeds office haven't registered fast enough, you probably just need a bit more liquidity relief, and then you'll start earning some good money again. But if your wife or husband has lost their jobs, you don't need another payment relief or another payment break, because what happens after that 3 months? You're going to be stuck in a situation. You're going to be back to square one. So for those customers, we want to find a lot more sustainable type of solution. And I think from the customers that we've spoken to, we've realized that our sort of broad brush solutions don't always fit individual circumstances, and very often we have to have a deep conversation with a customer to see how we can help each other. And that's why we called it Zama, our new mechanism in which we help customers and help each other create a better community. And so far, the take-up has been great, and the customer feedback. The stories that we hear from customers, brilliant customers who found themselves in the wrong sector at the right time, is heartbreaking. And as a bank, I think we've learned to respect that more than ever. So for us, it's been quite an enlightening experience in playing a role potentially slightly bigger than just being a financial institution, helping people to give some hope and show them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's such an important, thing to note, Ewald, that a bank would, take that role to understand that when you're servicing customers, you're more than just a bank, and your ability to, certainly as the way you phrase it, even as the bank, to help people, and I like the fact that you're even using that siyasizana as the word that, captures what you're certainly willing to be doing during this period, because it's understanding that these are customers that you've walked a path with for quite a number of years. And as you say, many of them have been very good customers. It just so happens that we're now finding ourselves in a very difficult situation, whether it's because you're in the wrong industry or whatever your set of circumstance is, but your income is now affected. And it doesn't mean that, life has to essentially stop and the nature of your finances has to be so negatively affected that your credit score is affected and all sorts of things essentially happen. So it's so important to be able to take a long-term and very individualistic approach to customers. And I think it's something that the market has been yearning for, because we often, critique financial institutions about how they typically view us as customers from a very broad perspective. It's usually once you start, working with your banker, that you're able to get that sort of slightly more tailored, treatment. But the reality is people who may not necessarily be private banking clients also need it because their set of circumstances isn't all the same. So I think the ability for Absa to spot that, particularly right now during this crisis, is certainly something that is commendable. We're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll also be looking at how this has essentially affected the industry as a whole. I think one of the really fascinating things is it's always great speaking to people who are in financial institutions and to gauge what the customer perception or reception has been when it comes to their home loans, because they are on the other end, right? I mean, I think as customers, we can get excited about low interest rates, but of course the banks are seeing our applications. The banks are the ones who are approving our applications. So just getting a sense of where the industry currently is in as far as property, especially right now with so many months into lockdown. I don't think any of us anticipated that we would certainly be living like this for such an extended period of time, and the ripple effect that this crisis was going to have in essentially every area of our life. We certainly want to hear from you. If you're joining us, of course, for the virtual property show, we will also be covering some of these issues. I think one of the very big things that we take for granted is how, whether you're a first-time home buyer, certainly a seasoned property investor, understanding various economic factors that are essentially going to affect your property portfolio or the property that you're about to buy is so crucial. And that's something that I know that I'm looking forward to, and I'm sure a lot of you at home are also looking forward to. So do let us know down here below if you're going to be joining us for the virtual property show that, of course, we are hosting as a private property. It is happening on Friday and Saturday. I want to see a lot of the familiar faces that we always see right here on the Private Property Podcast. We're going to go for a quick break, and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama. We are, of course, having Absa Home Loans this evening. It is the Wednesday edition of the show, and as usual, we do have Absa in, well, certainly not a studio, but on your screen. I see Howard Magatana saying Absa has been very significant in their quest to take over the property investment portfolio. We appreciate all of these Absa Heart Africa. Thank you very much there, Howard. Absa getting some love. We're also getting love on our Facebook, not only on our Facebook page, but also on our Instagram page. I see that we've got Lazarus Siofela, who is watching us, and Germano saying this, who's saying that this is a very important topic. And of course it is important, because so many of us are probably finding ourselves in very difficult situations financially because of this COVID-19 crisis. Ewald, I mean, I think perhaps take us through just, briefly around, the state of the real estate sector during this lockdown. I don't think any of us anticipated that it would last this long, but of course we are here and it isn't the end just yet. I think we're still going to feel the economic effects of this lockdown, even in months to come. I think, there have been some analysts who've said you're probably going to be looking at, next year, February, to get the full economic effect as a consumer, especially if you had lost your job, because perhaps you may have had some savings, perhaps you may have had a few policies that you can either cash in or that we're paying out. But come next year, Feb, perhaps some of that may have run out. So that's when we sort of slowly start feeling the full economic effects from a consumer level. So what has then been the effects of this, crisis on the real estate sector?
Yeah. So if you sort of look at what happened in the last couple of months, I think pre-lockdown, our economy was in an okay state, if I can call it an okay state. It wasn't doing particularly well, but not doing particularly bad either. We know that during lockdown, we've lost a lot of economic activity. So a lot of businesses closed. A lot of jobs weren't being completed because we just couldn't under the circumstances. So we expected after the lockdown and the effects of COVID that economic activity would suffer. So we were coming from a certain sort of midpoint, and we expect that to drop a bit. So after this, we expect to be in a slightly worse position. Now, I know South Africans are very resourceful, so I think we've got a lot of great young entrepreneurs which will help to pick up the economy quite quickly. But we haven't seen that in the residential market. And, when we started, when we were still in lockdown, I'll remind you that China came out of their lockdown. And the first thing that happened in China was that there was a property boom, because a lot of the customers there and the consumers were used to staying in small lock-up and go type of environments, and lockdown has changed their minds about buying property or owning property completely. So they wanted to leave and they wanted larger places. When the UK came out of their first lockdown, you saw the same thing, a mini property boom where people wanted to buy properties with gardens. Now in South Africa, luckily, we are a little bit more blessed with space. But there has been a very big trend in the South African market to move to smaller, denser places closer to work. And maybe that's not that attractive anymore, especially since there's a remote working culture that actually works quite well. So it is possible to stay a bit further away from the office. So I think we're changing our habits quite a lot. Also, if you do stay on a farm with a decent internet connection, you're probably not going to use your car as much. So your entire expense structure changes and you can spend more money on property. So there's a lot of those types of changes which we haven't really figured out. And we're seeing the market come up with that. But in the South African economy, at least, we've had a lot of interest rate reductions. And the Reserve Bank has been very good at managing our policy. That provided a significant amount of relief. So as I've explained, we started at a midpoint and we went down a bit. In the residential property market, we've actually also seen a very, very big increase in the number of applications, in inquiries for properties, in activity in the market. Now, that is positive, so I don't want to take away from how positive that is for the market. But I also want to caution that, that is driven by the interest rate reduction. And I think that after we get used to the interest rate reduction, we might find ourselves at a low spot again. So the interest rate reduction, what it does at the moment is it allows a lot of first-time buyers to buy properties. It allows a lot of tenants to afford properties, which is often a bit cheaper than the rental amounts. And I think it allows a lot of customers who are under some level of financial pressure to actually afford the installments. So it has supported the market greatly. And we don't expect those rates to move up quickly. So we don't expect them to surprise us by moving up 3 percentage points again next year and put all of those customers underwater with the increasing installments. So we don't expect it necessarily to be rapid in that nature. We expect this to be some sort of support level. But some interesting movements in the market. We're seeing application volumes at record highs. We're seeing a lot of younger buyers, first-time buyers being able to afford properties. But the top end of the market is still struggling. So anything sort of about 3 million, 5 million, those properties are still facing a lot of headwinds, and the amounts are definitely coming down. And for the customers who can afford, from a homeless perspective, they can't just afford, but they can also afford larger bonds. So instead of putting down a deposit, more customers are opting for 100% loan, which the banks are granting. And they're also opting for slightly bigger loans. So, in the past, if you could only afford a 2-bedroom apartment, now perhaps you can go for a 3-bedroom one. So I think that has changed a lot in the way that we buy properties and the type of market that we're seeing. So it was a fundamental shift in the types of customers and the types of property being bought. And I think that, I'd go as far as to say that has increased the demand so much that I think it protects the value. So I don't think that we're going to see house price declines anytime soon. And I think even in some cases, you might actually see house prices increasing if there's a lot of buyers looking for certain types of properties, which also sort of gives me a lot of comfort that the residential property market is still a good investment. I think from an investor perspective, though, they are going through a tough time because just as much as our customers from a bank perspective has faced some headwinds, so do tenants, and they're also struggling to afford. So a lot of landlords are extending themselves a bit further to try and give a benefit or a discount back to their tenants. But they do find themselves in a similar difficult situation as the banks. So those types of movements, I guess, will still need to play out, but they are significant, and there's a lot of early data points available to show that there's good activity, but the activity is definitely not the same as we saw earlier this year or last year.
Ewald, I'm going to squeeze in a quick question from one of our viewers before we wrap up and go to the first time home buyer show. And this one is coming in from one of our YouTube videos, who's a first time buyer who asks, did Absa change or adjusted their qualifying criteria for new home loan? This is for new home loan applications.
So the short answer is yes. We continuously adjust our criteria. But I think that, because we are a large institution with a responsibility towards the market, if properties can sell and customers can qualify for loans, that is good for us because that creates some level of demand. Now we have adjusted our criteria, but we are still trying to grow our business because we believe in the residential property market. We believe in our customers. And even though we change it, we sometimes move it down a bit, sometimes move it up. But I can say quite confidently today that our approval rates are still very similar to what they were before lockdown. Our customers are still in good standing, and we are very, very keen to receive applications for first-time buyers to help them buy their properties and realize their dreams.
Ewald, we are going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I think it's been quite an insightful to firstly just know that Absa is a partner with its customers. It's not just about getting a customer and not walking the journey with the customer and understanding the local context and even the global context of where we're currently finding ourselves in, but being able to work with the customer in order for them to not just meet their financial needs, but certainly be able to be there with them when they're facing these financial storms we find ourselves in. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Ewald.
Thank you very much, Zama.
And that is Ewald Kellerman, who is the Chief Risk Officer at Absa Home Loans. Of course, if you do want to reach out to Absa, we have shared their details down here below. Perhaps you're a customer or you're looking to get your first home loan. We certainly have them every Wednesday. So when you have those questions, those very burning questions that only a banking professional can answer, because we get the answer straight from the horse's mouth, then do send them through. Well, it is a Wednesday, and of course, as most Wednesdays, it is now going to be time for the first time home buyers show with ST Clarkson, who's going to be speaking to somebody that I know so many of us are going to learn so much from. That is Unomncebo Masuku, who's going to be talking about how she went from buying her first property to now owning 40 student accommodation units. And I know that so many of us probably want to get what lessons she learned from that first property and how she went and used those very same lessons to scale and grow her portfolio. So do stay tuned for that episode with ST Clarkson of the Private Property Podcast. I see you, Jumano. Thank you very much, and all the best on your property journey. That does, of course, bring us to an end of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Zama Kumalo. But we're still on your screens, so do stay tuned. Of course, Esty will be taking over. But as usual, I hope that you're staying home, staying safe, especially as we're expecting the storm here in Gauteng. And I'm going to hand over to Esty, who will be joining you shortly for the first time home buyers show. Good evening.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the First Time Homebuyer Show. I am your host, SD Class, and I hope you're all staying warm and keeping safe during this time. It is midweek. It's almost the weekend, so get ready. Tonight, we talk about how you go from buying your first home to investing in 40 student accommodation units. We have Nomtebo Masuku with us this evening. How are you?
Hi, SD. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Just last week, we spoke about how you go from buying your first property and building a home. And this week, we talk about how you go from buying your first property, building a home, and refurbishing it and creating student accommodation units. So Nomtebo, I want to jump straight into it. You know, I just want to find out, just before you even started thinking about student accommodation, when you bought your first home, what was that experience like and what inspired that?
Okay, so I've been reading Robert Kiyosaki's books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that's where I got my inspiration. So I knew that one day for me to have multiple streams of income, property would be one of those. So then I invested in property. I bought my first home. And why student accommodation? Because there is a shortage of supply for student accommodation in the country. And at the time when I bought my first property, the demand was just sky high. So I knew that if I invest in that, I would have my property fully tenanted and for the academic year. So I knew that return on investment would be good. So it just made sense in terms of revenue generation to have a commune of students, 10 of them, instead of a single person renting the whole house.
Right, so your motivation for turning your first home into student accommodation is because at the time the market was right and you were also really situated closely to a university. So to create and refurbish it into student accommodation really just made sense. So would you say that your inspiration for turning it into student accommodation is, you know, in the past few weeks, we've been talking a lot about financial freedom and independence. Is that really your main reason for you deciding on the fact that
freedom? Yes.
Okay, so financial freedom is definitely the one. So when you look at student accommodation and, you know, when you said you bought your first home, just last week we spoke to a young lady who bought her first home, and what she did was create or build a cottage on the outside and started to Airbnb it out to whoever is about to come. But obviously with refurbishing and renovating and expanding your property for other people to come and live on your property, there are certain obstacles that come with this. So in refurbishing it for a particular target market, which are students, what would you say were the obstacles that were in your way?
Yeah, for me, it was a very painful one, because in my mind, I knew that I'm gonna do this and I will make money out of it. So I did, after buying the house, I did some minor adjustments to the house, and then I got students in. A few months later, the city of Johannesburg came to do inspections, and they found that I did not comply to the requirements. I did not get land consent for use, so I didn't have the right to use my property as a commune. So it was a very painful thing. So when they find that you do not comply, they charge you like 4 times the value of your rates and taxes. So they fine you, and then I had to let the students go. And then the process for applying for the land use consent, it's got a turnaround time of 12 months. So for 12 months, I did not have that income anymore. And there was this fine that I'm now paying. And also the university's accreditation process is not easy for a first-time applicant. So it was painful, really. Yeah.
So the obstacles you faced is obviously, you know, when you started renting out different rooms in your home, you said about the land consent, which is different to what it would to buy a normal home and just, you know, let the rooms out. But with students, it's very difficult because, you know, some students have the issue of bursaries and affordability when it comes to these, you know, these off-campus accommodation. So how exactly did you deal with these obstacles that arise? You said for 12 months, you had to then sort this out. The students had to leave. So how did you deal with the other obstacles that came in your way?
So I had, together with my partner, then we decided, let's remodel the house properly. Let's get plans sorted out. And then we consulted with the university also for their requirements for student accommodations. And 18 months later, I was accredited and the house was full. So yeah, 18 months later.
So I think it's beneficial that you have a relationship with the university as well, because that really obviously helped you on your journey. And how does one get the relationship with the university? Because going into student accommodation, like, you know, we'll talk about this later, it really depends on the location. You obviously need to be closely situated to a university. So when you go to the university and kind of try and get more students to come to your accommodation, how does one go about creating that relationship with a university?
So the university, on their website, they have a link on privately owned student accommodation. If you download that, it will give you all the requirements that you need in order for you to be accredited. And you leave your numbers with them. When there are workshops, they will call you. Like every year, they would call the property owners for student accommodations. They will brief you of any changes, and then they will tell you when they will do the inspection. So the inspections for accreditation, they happen annually. So it doesn't mean that because I'm now accredited, I have this thing for life. No, every year they come, they do inspections, and they check if everything is still in order, and then they give you the accreditation. Because they can give you the accreditation and then you no longer follow it, and then the students live in a place that is not conducive, like you cut corners, it's not safe, you know, all of those things. That's why they make sure that annually they come and do the checks.
Right, so it's basically like being in partnership with the university, which is beneficial because that way you get more students, and because you're going, you know, by the book, it's also beneficial to you, because then that way we can always have rent and always, you know, income coming into our property and in our investment. And with the whole, you know, like you said earlier, for 12 months you had to kind of pay a fine and figure things out when you weren't going by the book. So this brings me back, you know, we always talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic, and what happened with a lot of students is they obviously had to leave university and go back home. So during that time, when students had to maybe vacate Johannesburg, how were you maintaining a rental income, or how did you manage that during COVID-19?
Yeah, fortunately, for accredited accommodations, the Minister of Higher Education made an announcement early during the lockdown that we won't be affected. Although the students are not there, rental was guaranteed for us simply because they had not called off the academic year. They didn't know what was going to happen, so we were guaranteed rental. So, which was such a relief. Yeah.
Right. So you were fortunate enough to continue having that
Yes.
income for the time. And
Yes.
you know, looking back, and also with students leaving, and some students, you know, you're lucky now, some students are coming back and they're going back slowly but surely, going back to campus, and your accommodation is being filled in this time. And I think that, you know, you've mentioned briefly in your background that you're looking to own an entire street of accommodation and refurbishing it so that, you know, you can keep accommodating students. Because the one thing we need, you know, coming from a different city or country to South Africa, is we need accommodation, especially when we're studying. And a little bit of my background is, like I told you earlier, I was fortunate enough to live off campus, and living off campus for a lot of students comes with a lot of things. You know, you get a certain type of accommodation that you need, that you like in the time, you know, certain things like, you know, we need Wi-Fi. We'd like a sense of freedom, and living on campus doesn't necessarily give you that much. You know, there's kind of a curfew sometimes that you need to be in by a certain time, and your accommodation is all off campus. And with that being said, as you're going on your journey to owning an entire street close to the University of Johannesburg, are there any things that you would change in this journey that you've done maybe, or that you do differently going into buying more property?
Okay, firstly, with my first property, I bought it using my personal details and all. And then with the second property and the other ones, I used a company. So it's important to register a business and to run your first property properly, so that it allows you to buy more properties as well. So I have 4 properties that I'm using for student accommodation, of which 3 are in the same street. So the strategy is to get more properties in the same street, because it allows you to grow further. If you buy your neighbor's house, you'll be able to have a bigger property and also have enough parking space for your tenants. So that's the strategy as well. So yeah.
Right. So I mean, all the best for, you know, eventually owning the entire street, because that's really
that's my dream.
Exactly. That should be your goal. And, you know, you're so driven and so passionate about what you're doing. And the way you cater to students is absolutely amazing. We just quickly, before we run to an ad break, have a question from Germano Snyders from YouTube, which is, there are obviously certain challenges you face when letting to students. And this was going to be my next question, is why students and not young professionals? But we'll get back to that. So my question is, Germano Snyders, his friend went into a similar model like you're doing, and he spent a lot of his money on maintenance. So maybe talk a little bit about the maintenance and how you spend money. Do you maybe, as Nomcebo, do you spend money on maintenance, or what is your biggest issues with letting to students?
Like when we let to students, we let them sign contracts, and we make sure that we make our place livable and very conducive for studying. And we put rules in place, so there are no sleepovers, no visitors at certain times of the day. And, you know, when there are issues, we attend to them. So they tend to respect us as well, because we keep our end of the stick as well. So it's not an issue. Like our properties, students want to live in our properties, so they abide by the rules, and our rules are not unreasonable. It's just to make sure that everyone who lives in that space can be comfortable. You are not going to make parties in the property when someone else wants to study. So we don't want someone to go to the library when they can study in their house. So if you want to go and make noise, go and do it somewhere else, but don't be a nuisance to other people. Also, it's important to have a good relationship with your neighbors when you let to students, because if they start making noise, like, you are becoming a problem to your neighbors. And one of the requirements as well, when you apply for accreditation, you need to put a poster outside of your house for 30 days for the neighbors to comment. So if the neighbors have issues, they will raise their issues with the City of Johannesburg, and then the City of Johannesburg will convene a meeting between you and the neighbors. The neighbors will tell you what the issues are, and then you need to come up with mitigation plans for that before everything can be approved. So it's very important that you have laws and rules in place and just make sure that everyone is okay. Otherwise, you won't grow if you have that bad name that, oh, another student accommodation. If people know that it's you, then they are at ease to say, oh, we know that there'll be peace and order.
Exactly. And I think it's, the student and landlord relationship needs to be really, it needs to be such a good relationship, because like you said, yes, you lay down the rules, you give them the lease, and they sign the lease. And because you've made it so comfortable for students to live at your property, they then start respecting your rules. The relationship with the landlord needs to be in such a way that if there's an issue in the house, the landlord also, attends to the issue on time. Because when you have a good relationship with your students, they will then respect the rules that you've put into place. Sorry, Nomtebo, just before we go to the break, another question is, how does one go about registering for student accommodation? You said earlier about how you were fined for 12 months and you had to take all the students out. So when you did the proper process of registering, what was that like? What would I need to do now just to register?
Okay, you need to apply to the city for the land use consent. And if you are making any changes to the structure, you need to have new house plans, and also the neighbor issue. You need to post for the neighbors to comment for 30 days that you are changing the property into a student accommodation. And also when you remodel the property, make sure that you are in line with the university's requirements as well as the city's requirements. And once you are done, you will get inspections done on your place, and you'll be issued with occupancy certificate. And then after that, it's only then that you can house students. So no shortcuts.
No shortcuts. Do it the right way, or else you're going to have to pay a fine for 12 months. Thank you so much, Nomtebo. We'll be back very soon. And I read an article just before we go to an ad break about how student accommodation is actually like a golden market for SA investors. And we know this. Students come every single year. You probably get new students every year, or you get students who actually complete their entire university life at your accommodation, because it's that relationship with the landlord and the student that we spoke about. And just to keep, like you said, you refurbish and you renovate your place to suit the needs of a student, which is really important, and we all need to bear that in mind. So as we go to our ad break, comment yes or no. Would you invest in student accommodation? Let us know. Comment yes. If not, and you're still a bit hesitant, when we come back, Nomtebo might change your mind, and then you comment no. So we'll see you soon.
Okay.
everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining this evening. We are talking about buying your first home and refurbishing it and starting to invest in student accommodation. We do have Nomtebo with us this evening, who has done exactly that. And she's here to share her experience with us and also give us some advice on how we can become better at this and become these investors who invest in this golden mine, student accommodation. We do know that Nomtebo has been through certain obstacles that, you know, when we deal with these obstacles, we have to pay a fine. And that's exactly what she did. And this leads me to my next topic, which is about investors, like considering going the legal way. A lot of the time we know that student accommodation or landlords really have not gone by the book, and their tenants or their neighbors don't even know that they are student accommodation, you know, so people come and they ask questions. And like you said, you know, your neighbors also need to confirm or be happy with the fact that you are letting to students. And I want to go more into the process of getting student accommodation. You spoke about registration, but the process that goes into, like you said, you'd like to own an entire street. What is exactly the process that I could maybe, or some advice that you could give me when I would like to start letting to students and refurbishing and remodeling my home to accommodate students?
Okay. Firstly, when you remodel your home, you need to understand your market, you know, based on the area and rental income that you are expecting. You need to only work out the budget to achieve more with less. Once you know those, that what is the market, what am I going to make, just to avoid, you know, spending a lot of capital on this property and then you are going to get less returns on them. So it's very important to know that, and also know where to buy components that you're going to use, and have, you know, an eye for detail and design as well, because if you have an eye for design, you'll be able to buy stuff at salvage places instead of upmarket places, and they'll still look beautiful. And also, if you are looking to own a street like me, so you need to identify the area, and then every now and then drive around the area to check if there are properties for sale. Like, you need to invest in this, you know. Spend time making sure that you find the places. Also, just know your neighbors, because when they sell, instead of going to estate agents, they might tell you first. So it's easy, like when they know what your intentions are. So yeah, build that relationship with your neighbors, build the relationship with the students, build the relationship with the universities, and also have contacts at the town planning offices, so that it becomes easier for you when you want to maybe make drawings or make changes. You know, when people know you, you know, we always say that your network is your net worth. So if you want to be successful, you need to have a team of people around you, and not forgetting that the students, yes, they are students, but they are your customers. So you are here to serve them. You are here to address accommodation issues. So make it nice for them to stay at your place. Like, for example, the students that stay at my place, yes, they stay from first year, and if they're going to do postgrad, they do it while staying at my place. And also it makes it easier for me with regards to marketing my places. I have my current students marketing for me, you know, recommending my places to their friends, and instead of me having to market and look for tenants. So that happens because of that relationship and what I'm offering them. Not that we don't have disagreements with them, it's students, they'll test you, but how you deal with those challenges will make sure that your relationship with them stays longer than that. Also, what I want to mention is that I've had some of my tenants like watch me how I'm doing business, and years later I'm mentoring them. They are in the same business now. They are also renting out students to accommodation to students. So they left my property, bought property and rent it out to students, and I'm helping them along their journeys because I've paid my school fees. I've got I had the fine, you know, I had to go without income. So whoever needs guidance, I help in that area. So yeah.
Exactly. You know, you've worn the t-shirt, and I love what you said about how your students become your marketers, because your students, they know people who are coming to university 5 years from now, who know that someone's goal who is in high school is to come to the University of Johannesburg, and they automatically recommend you. So your tenants become marketers for you. So to have that good relationship with them is very important. We have one question quickly from Lesego. So as for the accommodation fee, you spoke about the market and figuring out what the rental fee should be for students. This is a question. As for the accommodation fee, which is normally fixed from the institution,
Yes.
how do you structure it to make it profitable for you, to benefit you in the long run?
So the institutions are paying us really well, I must say. That's why it makes sense to go into student accommodation than any other type of model. So it's very lucrative, it's profitable, yeah, it's good, and you are guaranteed. Like now with COVID, if I had young professionals, they would have came to me and told me that we're not getting paid, we are at home, we can't pay you. But I didn't experience that because I'm in partnership with institutions. Also, my students are not just only NSFAS students, bursary students, they also love our places. So I have a couple of students that are sponsored by bursaries that stay in my places. So yeah, that's that.
Okay, no, that's good to know. So you didn't actually, you know, go through so much when it came to COVID-19. You were covered by the institution, which is really good to know. So that's also, let's emphasize on the fact that to have the relationship with an institution is very important. And when you go buy your first home and you do things illegally, so you would not be covered in something like a pandemic, you know, where you were fortunate enough to be covered during this time. Monique Smith is asking about how do you manage your water, your electricity, and your electricity usage? Does that maybe come from the students, or is that included in the rental? How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's included in the rental. Yeah. It's included in the
so
rental. And also, let me add, when we do remodelings in the house, we make sure that we apply cost-effective measures in the equipment that we put. Instead of your normal 2-plate stove, we would put a 2-plate that doesn't consume much electricity. So we put energy efficient equipment in our areas so that we can save on that.
Exactly. And I think when it comes to electricity usage or water, I think that, like you said, as the landlord, you need to figure out the rental income and the rental fee. So that, I guess, entirely depends on the landlord and the current mortgage or the bond you're paying off right now. So that's for the landlord to figure out how they would charge the students. Is it separate? Is it included in rent? And I think that it's to students, as soon as you say that it's included, you know, we all run to that property because we're like, okay, this is a good deal. I get Wi-Fi, I get electricity, water, it's all included. And this is something that I want to be a part of, that I want to do. And, you know, being in this market of investing in student accommodation has become, like I said, a golden mine for investors. And I'm sure that letting out to students can be a little bit tricky. You know, like you said earlier, the students test you. So what are some of the obstacles or challenges you face when letting out to students?
Like some of them, you'll tell them upfront that noise is not allowed at this house, no loud music, no parties, and no visitors after a certain time of the day. And they'd still do that, but you become like a parent to them, you know? You sit them down, you talk to them, you make them understand. They'll hate you, do it again, but you must just be patient. It's a customer, it's your customer, and they are kids. their parents are putting them under your care. So you also have that role. So having a good caretaker also plays a very, very important role, because when they see an adult on site, they know that certain things they can't do, you know.
Exactly. So automatically, you know, like, again, I'm emphasizing on the relationship between landlord and tenant. Automatically, they have that good relationship with you. So they start respecting the rules and regulations that come with being in accommodation. And, you know, so I think we've heard about the advantages, and it is the connection with the university, so that, you know, you can continue having this sort of rental income even when students are off your property and they leave. And you also now a trusted student accommodation within this particular area, close to a particular university. So people are already recommending your accommodation to other students that are coming from afar. And I think because you are in the business of refurbishing and renovating and making things very comfortable for students, like you said, what are some of the features that, if I had to start letting out to students, some key features that I would have to add to my accommodation for students?
Okay, Wi-Fi is number one. It's on top of the list. You need Wi-Fi, especially now with the introduction of online learning. You need that. You need a coin-operated washing machine to avoid, you know, having the whole community come and do your laundry at your premises. So yeah, and also a caretaker who would address their issues promptly when they report. Don't wait for 24 hours before you attend to them. Like, if you can't fix the issue immediately, at least communicate, let them know when it will be fixed. And if you have that reputation to say, when they call and say the geyser is not working, they know someone will come and sort it out. Like, it becomes a home far away from home. So they love that also. So also mainly a clean space. You need to get someone to keep the place clean, but also in areas like, if you don't have a person that comes every day to do the cleaning, amongst themselves, the occupants, they need to agree how they're going to keep the place clean on the days that the person that cleans is not coming to the premises. So it works out well. And yeah, and like make the house beautiful, so that even the ones that are now like starting to work, they still want to stay at your premises. Or later in life, should you decide that I don't want to do student accommodation anymore, can you just convert and make it into a young professionals place? So our place is renovated like that in December and January, because the students are not there, and I can easily make it an Airbnb for December and January because of the way I have renovated the place, you know.
Exactly.
I can from that and still get income in the months when the students are not there.
Exactly. And that's such a smart way to think about it, you know, having your place. And like my question earlier, why students? But in actual fact, your place caters to young adults and students. We have one more question just before we close off. This is from Katie Barber, which says, she says, it sounds like you've been very busy and active within the University of Johannesburg, so students based at UJ. And she's asking, would you ever consider expanding your student accommodation investment to target other universities and other students? So maybe move closer to the University of Wits. I don't know.
I also have students from Wits that stay in my properties as well. So yeah, I'm looking at getting places more around Auckland Park and in the Parktown areas as well. And I'm also looking at the University of Pretoria and TUT campus. So growth is definite. It's in my plans. So to expand to other areas, not just UJ.
Exactly, but before we do that, we're first gonna get the entire street, right, Nomcebo?
We get the street and then we go to other places.
Exactly. So we start at home and then we'll expand later. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. My final question, just before we end off, is how beneficial would you say it is for, some young property investors to actually invest in student accommodation? We've heard all of the pros and cons about doing it. And also we've heard that how you can actually, make or become financially free when doing this. But how beneficial would you say it is for us to do that?
Okay, the revenue obviously is very attractive and the demand is always high. So you are guaranteed that you'll get a student knocking at your doors looking for accommodation. So just use that to your advantage. Also, with the pandemic, we thought maybe like it's taking the business away, but actually it's presenting an opportunity to the university to get even more students than they would take previously, because they would say there's no space. So with online learning, they can take up more students to study, and then the students will stay in the off-site accommodations, residences, yeah.
Right, and then Mandisa Mapengu would like to know: are there any risks when investing in student accommodation? We know that if you go about it the wrong way and not the legal way, that there are risks and implications that come with it. But if you do go by the book, like you are now doing, what other risks are there involved in investing in student accommodation?
I think the risks when you buy your property in student accommodation, always look for property at a walking distance from the university, because if students have to walk long, like they call and they ask, where is this place? And if you say after the dam, they like, no, I'm not going after the dam. So before you invest, just make sure that it's closer to the university. They'll be able to walk. They won't walk long distances. And yeah, those are the risks that I can think of.
So I think basically before we even get to risks is really just look at the amenities that are close. And, like you said, students want to be close to university. They don't want to walk, because we also know, there are certain things like crime that are involved. And students sometimes sit in the labs till 11 p.m. They don't want to walk that late at night. So thank you so much, Nomcebo, for joining us. You've really taken risks. You've persevered and you've gone through everything. And I think, after listening to the pros and the cons, that this is really an investment I would love to even take on myself. And if you have any last words that you'd like to share with us, any advice that you'd like to give us as young investors or who would like to go into this market, maybe?
I think the time is right. Just go for it. Scary as it is, just jump in and do it. There will never be a good time as now. So just do it.
The right time is now. There, you've heard it. Thank you so much, Nomcebo, for joining us this evening. If you have any other questions, any comments that you'd like to comment, please do comment. And Nomcebo might get back to them later. And if you'd like to see some of our past shows, the conversation continues. Just click on the link below. And that's all for tonight. We'll see you guys next week, Wednesday at 7:45. Thank you so much, Nomcebo. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
For you to succeed as an aspiring or growing property investor in South Africa in this market, you need 5 things. Number 1, you need local and practical knowledge. Number 2, you need a team around you. Number 3, you need access to the tools that the professionals use at a fraction of the price. Number 4, you need a collaboration platform. And number 5, you gotta have the willingness and the readiness to take action. So my name is Carlo Mariani. I'm the founder of The Property Coach and the chief hacker of the propertyhack.club. So come and join me at the virtual property show by Private Property for 2 days of very powerful knowledge. And I will see you at the booth. I've got a great free offer for you. Or join me for one of the master classes where I will share with you how to choose the right investment area for you. Ciao from Carlo, chief hacker of the propertyhack.club. Take action, because nothing works unless you do.
Hey everyone, my name is Adrian. I'm the CEO of Remax Southern Africa. I look forward to seeing some of you at the virtual private property show on the 2nd and the 3rd of October. It's free of charge. I'm going to be covering 2 topics. The one is how to stand out in a sea of vanilla. It's called Be Remarkable. So I hope to catch you there. And the second talk is about the things to look out for when buying a home. So first time buyers or even repeat buyers, hopefully I can share with you some tips and techniques and what to look for. So hope to catch you there. I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Now, this is a good decision you have made to buy a property. But what defects did you miss that could cost a fortune? You should engage me as an experienced property inspector to point out the good, the bad, and the ugly of your new property. This will take the guesswork and doubt out of the transaction, and you will confidently make an informed decision. My name is Marisha Robus, owner of Gauteng Property Inspections, a Absa certified master inspector and ITC certified roof inspector. Join me on Friday at 5:15 to learn what the 3 things are you must always inspect before buying a house, and on Saturday at 3:15 to learn what the 4 simple maintenance tasks are that will save you money. Come join us for 2 days of live property education, free of charge, at the virtual property show brought to you by Private Property on the 2nd and 3rd of October. This event is free of charge to the public with limited space available, so register now on the Private Property website.
Are you looking to buy your very first property? It could be your first home or it could be an investment property, but you're not quite sure how to go about it, or you may be a bit nervous about getting into the South African property market right now. My name is Andrew Walker, and I will be representing the SA Property Investors Network as well as the Property Academy on the 2nd and 3rd of October at South Africa's largest property show. It's the virtual property show hosted by Private Property, and you don't want to miss out. You see, I've attended all of their property shows, and it's a great platform to start learning and networking with like-minded South Africans, people on the same boats as yourself. And the great thing is that it's a free event on the 2nd and 3rd of October. Just click the link and book your seat. You can expect to learn from a whole range of South Africa's top leading experts. I will be talking about flipping properties in this market below $1 million. What should you be thinking about if you want to flip properties and make a profit? There'll be other speakers talking about if you just want to buy your first home, your first property, what do you need to think about? What does that checklist look like? So if you're interested in property in South Africa, now is the time to join us this weekend, the 2nd and 3rd of October at the virtual property show hosted by Private Property, and we will see you there.
Hi, I'm Brian Kepper. I'm a 10-time South African motorcycling champion. My family and I have chosen to live in Fourways. There's some really great suburbs in our neighborhood. There's a lot of families living in the surrounding areas in places like Lone Hill and Cedar Lakes. What draws people to Cedar Lakes is that it's so close to the Broadacre Shopping Centre, Cedar Square and Fourways Life Hospital. Lone Hill is a major draw card for many families. It's got some great smaller commercial centres and some fantastic schools like Crawford College. From an entertainment point of view, Monte Casino really comes alive at night. There's so much on the go, and there's an incredible energy in the area. Our family just loves the fast-paced lifestyle that Fourways brings. But honestly, the thing that attracted us most to this area was the active lifestyle that it offers. As a family, we've chosen to live in Fourways because of the lifestyle and convenience, and this is our neighborhood.